If you've ever been involved in qualitative research, you know there's this one huge looming question that hangs over everything. It's all about a concept called saturation, and it boils down to something that sounds simple but really isn't.
Seriously, think about it. You're doing interviews, you're doing observations. When do you stop? After 10 interviews, 20, 50? How do you know for sure that you've collected enough data to actually get the full picture? That's the exact problem that saturation is supposed to solve.
So the classic textbook definition, right? It's the moment you hit the point of diminishing returns. You're doing another interview and you realize you're not hearing anything new. The patterns are repeating, the themes feel solid. It's supposed to be our stop sign, but, and this is a big but, in practice, it gets really messy.
And that leads us to what I think of as the saturation paradox. On the one hand, getting to saturation is absolutely essential for your research to be considered trustworthy. But on the other hand, the way most people actually apply it is deeply, and I mean deeply, flawed.
Just how flawed are we talking? Well, a major review looked at 429 different studies, and what it found is pretty shocking. A whopping 76% of studies that claimed they reached saturation, they gave zero evidence to back it up. None. They just said, yep, we reached saturation and moved on. That's not just a tiny mistake, that's a huge systemic problem.
So, what's the big deal? What actually happens when we get saturation wrong? Well, the stakes are incredibly high. It can end up damaging the very theories we're trying to build and really undermine entire fields of knowledge.
You can basically mess this up in two critical ways. First, there's the false positive. That's when you stop collecting data way too early. You think you've heard it all, but you've actually missed some crucial pieces of the puzzle. Then you've got the opposite, the false negative, where you just keep going and going long after you've hit saturation, wasting precious time, money, and energy.
And this is where you see the long-term damage. When a big foundational study gets this wrong, every single study that builds on top of it inherits that same shaky foundation. It creates what you could call a cascading effect, where one mistake can echo through the literature for decades, creating confusion and ambiguity.
Okay, but it is not all doom and gloom. There is a way out of this mess. The paper we're digging into today from Moore, Aguanese, and Darden in the Leadership Quarterly actually gives us a solution, a really clear, systematic framework to fix this problem once and for all.
And what's great is that it all comes down to three beautifully simple steps. First, you define what saturation actually means for your specific project. Second, you assess if you've really hit that point. And third, you report how you know. Simple, right? Let's break down how it actually works.
So let's roll up our sleeves. How do we put this framework into action in a real project? Well, it all starts with a step that honestly most people just skip entirely. Step 1. You have to define it. Saturation isn't some universal constant. What it means depends entirely on your research philosophy. Are you more of a post-positivist, just trying to test a theory that already exists? Or are you an interpretivist, trying to build a new theory from the ground up? Your answer totally changes what enough data looks like.
You see, this means there are different kinds of saturation for different jobs. If you're building a brand new theory, you might aim for theoretical saturation, which is all about making sure your new theory is fully fleshed out. But if you're just testing existing ideas, you might use a priori thematic saturation, which is more about confirming themes you already expected to find. It's all about picking the right tool for the job. Okay, on to step 2, assess. This is where the rubber meets the road. We have to move past that vague gut feeling that things are getting repetitive. Instead, the framework demands that we use rigorous, systematic checks to prove we've actually reached saturation.
And here are some of those powerful checks you can use. You've got triangulation, using different data sources to see if they all point to the same thing. There's negative case analysis, where you actively hunt for examples that don't fit your theory. And one of my favorites, member checking, is where you actually go back to the people you interviewed and ask them, hey, did I get your story right? These are the things that build real confidence in your claim.
So you see, this whole framework is not just about ticking off boxes on a checklist. It connects directly to the absolute highest goal of any qualitative research, building knowledge that people can actually trust.
When you get saturation right, when you define it, assess it, and report it properly, you are directly strengthening the 5 pillars of trustworthy research. Your work instantly becomes more transparent, your findings are more credible and confirmable, your conclusions become more plausible, and your results are more likely to be transferable to other situations.
And that's really the heart of it. This isn't just some technical exercise for methodologists. Being rigorous about saturation is about making sure that the theories we build are strong, that they're reliable, and that they can actually stand the test of time. It's about building our knowledge on a foundation of solid rock instead of shifting sand.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. The next time you're deep in your own research, don't just ask, do I have enough data? Ask yourself, how do I know I have enough? Because how you answer that question, that's what will determine if what you're building is truly made to last.